Okay, so a little technical difficulty over there, but we're back and hopefully this works as well. Part 2, continuing with text number 5. It says, a Gentile who was forced by another person to violate one of his commandments is permitted to transgress. Even if he is forced to worship false gods, he may worship them, for Gentiles are not commanded to sanctify God's name. In other words, basically, this idea that a person should be killed rather than violate the 3 cardinal sins is only for a Jew, not for a Gentile. A Gentile and Yosef, well, we couldn't call him a Gentile. You still can't call him a Jew either. For him, would have been better for him to have violated this commandment and sinned with her rather than be killed. Now, ultimately, he wasn't killed as a result of it, but there was that threat. She, according to the Medrash, she clearly threatened him to do so. And we find proof for this in the next text, in that story that I just mentioned of Naaman, that he asked Elisha for advice what to do regarding the fact that he's going to be forced to commit idol worship, even though he wants to live like a Jew or like a person who believes in God and not worship idols. And he says over there, and Naaman said, and now if only your servant will be given a load of earth as carried by a team of mules, for your servant will no longer offer up burnt offerings or a sacrifice to other deities but to God. For this thing may God forgive your servant. When my master comes to Beth Rimmon to prostrate himself there, and he leans on my hand, and I will prostrate myself in Beth Rimmon. When I bow in Beth Rimmon, may God forgive your servant for this thing. And he said to him, go in peace, and he went some distance away from him. And others, Elisha, rather than telling him, no, you really can't do that, that's unacceptable, he says to him, go in peace. And that's it. That's his guidance to Naaman. Is not, he doesn't say don't bow to the deity. In other words, it's acceptable in those circumstances. Again, to bring this back to our conversation over here, it would seem that Yosef would have been allowed to forfeit, to not forfeit. It would have been forbidden to forfeit his life, and would have been allowed to submit to Potiphar's wife. Text number 7. If in fact Yosef was now obligated to forfeit his life rather than commit adultery, then refusing to commit adultery would effectively be prohibited, inasmuch as a Gentile is forbidden to murder, which includes suicide, God forbid. If so, we can ask for a simple halachic from us. If so, we can ask from a simple halachic standpoint: was Joseph allowed to endanger his life to withstand the test? The answer to that question is less important, as much as it highlights again the incredible situation that Yosef was in. A, where did he find the moral courage to stand up? And B, perhaps, just perhaps, he should have had the what was it that stopped him? He had the loneliness. He had the fact that there was no one around. He had even halacha on his side. Jewish law was on his side. Perhaps he could have committed a sin. Which brings the text to section 3, text number 8. So when we say that he saw his father Yaakov, we don't mean that the way he saw his father. He saw the size of his beard or the color of his hair. When we say that he saw his father Yaakov, there was something specific about his father that he saw that triggered in him not just a memory of the level of morality that was expected of him, but that triggered in him something that helped him withstand the test. Text number 8, it says, the beauty of Jacob, our forefather, is a semblance of the beauty of Adam, the first man. On a simple level, this means that the two of them just simply looked alike. But on a deeper level, what it's communicating over here is that not just that they looked alike, that they looked similar, but they looked exactly alike. And their behaviors in the world had something that was linked one to the other. What is that? So as we know, Adam, the first man on earth, or first human on earth, he was a perfect man brought into a perfect world. All that was wonderful, all that was going great, until he committed that sin. And once he committed that sin, the impact and the result of that sin lasted forever, including up until today. Text number 9. And to man he said, because you listened to your wife and you ate from the tree from which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed be the ground for your sake, with With toil shall you eat of it all the days of your life, and it will cause thorns and thistles to grow for you, and you shall eat from the herbs of the field. With the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for you were taken therefrom, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Basically, prior to the sin of the eating of the tree, two things. One is that man should not have had to work. This life that we live, forever chasing the almighty buck and having to just try to provide and make a living for ourselves, is a result of the sin of the golden calf, of the sin of the eating from the tree that Adam did. Furthermore, the idea of death was not originally part of the plan, as it were. It's only a result of the fact that that Yosef mixing all the names together. It's only a result of the fact that Adam ate from the tree. As a result of him eating from the tree, that caused that the death should suddenly become a thing in this world. And as prior to that, death wasn't supposed to be part of the plan. Only once he committed a sin, so now the human had sin inside of him. Well, sin is not allowed to exist for eternity, and therefore death became something that was part of life. So basically, the point that we're trying to bring out of it is that Adam's sin wasn't just a simple disobeying of God's command, but rather it had an impact that we would have to work, we would have to, that death would now become a part of our reality for eternity, one that we're still dealing with until this very day. Now, according to Kabbalah and according to the Jewish tradition, the sins are there in order to be repaired. So the mistakes that Adam made, we spend our life trying to repair those mistakes. And those mistakes were repaired via Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But ultimately, Yaakov was the one that concluded the repair job of the sin of Adam. Text number 10. Adam sinned with 3 sins: idolatry, incest, and murder. Where do we see that? So just parenthetically, idolatry, those 3 sins. Thereafter was rectified by the forefathers. Abraham rectified the sin of idolatry by recognizing God. Isaac rectified the sin of murder by offering sacrifices on the altar. And Jacob rectified the sin of incest. Hold on here, just get these things. Jacob rectified the sin of incest by the fact that the term is used mitaso shlemo. His shlemo, his bed was completed, and all of his children came out being God-observing kind of, they were all perfect. None of them left the ways of being followers of God, followers of Hashem. Now, going back to what we said before, when we said that Yosef was at the verge of committing the sin, he had withstood her seduction for such a long time, but now he's ready to go and commit the sin. What gave him the strength? That he saw the image of his father. Meaning to say, not that he saw his father's face or how his father looked, but he saw that his father, not only did he look like Adam, he looked like Adam because he was the one who ultimately concluded the repair of the sin of Adam. And what was unique about Adam's sin, not just was that it wasn't just a sin, but it was a sin that had cosmic consequences that affected the rest of humanity for the rest of time. And Yosef realized at that sudden moment, look at Adam, he also was alone. Well, he had his wife there, but he was essentially alone on the earth, and regardless of the fact that he was alone and it seemed like there was nothing to lose, his act, even in a vacuum, impacted all of humanity for the rest of time. And suddenly Yosef understood that, that old expression, if there's a tree in the forest that falls down and there's no around, does it actually make a sound? Or the more humorous variation of that is, if you say something in a forest and your wife is not there, are you still wrong? This idea is that even if there's no one around, and even if there's nothing to lose, and even if he even had halacha on his side telling him that it would be okay for him to commit this immoral act, the fact of the matter is that he didn't just represent himself. He wasn't truly alone. All of humanity was relying on him to get this right. And his mistake would impact the future of humanity. As we see from Adam, his one little act affected all of humanity. And Yosef, if he were to submit to this woman and commit this sin, all of humanity would be impacted by his sin. Text number 11 says, when he saw his father's visage, Jacob's face, which resembled Adam's face, which brings to mind the fact that specifically Jacob, the chosen one of the forefathers, rectified Adam's sin. He was effective at the point that he put aside all considerations and legal back and forth as to the possible permissibility of sinning, and he withstood the test. Why? Because he realized that it's not just him alone, that he represents all of humanity. He realized the most important lesson, and that's really the most important lesson that we're taking away from today, is that you matter. Sometimes we find ourselves facing a choice between good and evil, between right and wrong. And we waver. We say, no one's around, no one's going to know, it's not going to make a difference. And even if the situation is not so black and white, we say, you know what, you can find the justification for your behavior. And you say, I could get away with this and it would be okay. And even if we know deep down that the better choice is this one and not that one, but we find a way to justify ourselves. So where do we get the strength to make the right decision in such a circumstance? So the answer is, when we find ourselves in such a situation, we must remember that this challenge is not just about me and not just about the here and now. It affects everybody, even if it seems like it's something small. It affects everyone. We have to realize that that image that Yosef saw of his father, Yaakov, was like the face of Adam, is something that we also need to recognize and view as well, and that will help us make the right decisions in these difficult times of moral clarity. Text number 12, in the Rebbe's words, when a Jew encounters a challenge or believes he has encountered a challenge to the point where he or she feels like a servant in his Egyptian master's home, like Yosef in the house of the Egyptian master, whose wife cajoles him to at least simply lie with her, even without actually sinning. According to the Medrash, that was one of the choices she put in front of him when she realized that she couldn't go all the way with him. And she grabs him by his garment and assures him that none of the people of the house are in the house, meaning nobody will see, nobody will hear, nobody will know about it, and furthermore that there are a number of ways in which it is permissible, and above all, succumbing to such a challenge will prevent it from being punished by death. In other words, with all these justifications, and tomorrow it's possible to repent and even go to do great things, such a situation must see his father's visage looming in the window. A Jew ought to clear his or her head and simply look at his father's face, the face of Jacob, our forefather, who resembles Adam, God's handiwork. And when he does this, every single action at any given time or place is no longer a private single matter, but something upon which the entire universe depends. What we need to realize is that we're not alone. The whole world is resting upon us. There's no such thing as being slipping out to the island to eat some pork, so that no members of the congregation see you eating it. It's wherever you are, you're in that scenario where everything depends on your actions. Like the Rambam gives the famous examples that a person ought to look at the world as if it's a scale that's evenly balanced, and one good deed will tip the scale for good, or one bad deed will tip the scale for bad, as we read in text number 13. Throughout the entire year, a person should look at himself as equally balanced between merit and sin, and the world as equally balanced between merit and sin. If he performs one sin, he tips the balance and that of the entire world to the side of guilt, and brings destruction upon himself. In contrast, if he performs one mitzvah, he tips his balance and that of the entire world to the side of merit, and brings deliverance and salvation to himself and others. This is implied by the verse, a righteous man is the foundation of the world. In other words, he who acted righteously tipped the balance of the entire world to merit and saved it. To close it out, if our actions were isolated, then we could convince ourselves that they wouldn't make such a difference. But if right now what I'm about to do is going to affect the entire world, I better not take any chances. Rather than try and rationalize it and find the easy way out, I'd better go ahead and do whatever it is that I must, and all other considerations aside. Scary as it sounds, such a mindset is incredibly empowering, because lest we ever think that we and our actions don't matter in the grand scheme of things, the Torah teaches us that we do matter, and that our every action affects the entire world. And this is a powerful lesson from this parasha to tell us that we do matter. Doesn't matter if you're sitting quietly in your house in a private place where you think no one sees you, nothing matters. In fact, you do matter, and therefore this should help guide us in all of our decisions that we make. Wishing you a wonderful rest of the week, and looking forward to seeing everyone together next week, Wednesday evening of Hanukkah.